So what other fantasy books besides Tolkien do I love to collect? Hey everyone, this is James from Brewing Books. Thank you so much for sticking with this channel. I know it's been a long time since I posted my last video, but it's been quite a few busy months, I'm afraid. But I'm back with another video, and today I will be looking at some of my other fantasy books which are not Tolkien related. So what kind of fantasy books do I collect, have read, or have yet to read from the fantasy genre? So let's begin. First up, obviously, is the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. This is a 7-volume special edition slipcase hardback edition. So far I've read only the first 3, which I believe were The Magician's Nephew, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and The Horse and His Boy. And yeah, I've been enjoying it so far. It's been a while since I've read the 3rd volume, and I would really love to continue reading the remaining four volumes, but probably since it's been quite a long while, I would probably have to go back and start from the first one and then continue the rest. And I know people's favorite is Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, but I have to say that The Magician's Nephew, which is the first volume in this collection, was a really great read. Next up is The Once and Future King by T.H. White. Now, this was a book which was really hyped, and I've read really great reviews about this. And when I read this copy, I have to say I was completely blown away. I really enjoyed White's writing style, the story, the fact that it has Arthurian elements and motifs in the stories. I think this is one of the best fantasy books out there. So if you haven't read this, be sure to check it out. So basically this is quite a hefty volume, and in fact it contains 5 books. So I have The Sword and the Stone, The Witch in the Wood, The Ill-Made Knight, The Candle in the Wind, and The Book of Merlin. Now, I believe, if I remember correctly, The Book of Merlin is an incomplete 5th book in the series, and in fact it copies a lot from the 3rd or the 4th book. For some reason it was never fully completed. However, I would still urge anyone who's even remotely interested in either fantasy or the Arthurian myth to have a look at this book and really give it a good read, because it's fantastic. Next we have Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials. Now, I have yet to read Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials, but from what I've heard, it's a really great read. I started reading it a couple of years back, and for some reason I stopped. I have to say I kind of got a bit discouraged by the enormous volume of this book, which contains the 3 parts: the Northern Lights, the Subtle Knife, and the Emperor Spyglass. I was a bit sort of discouraged by the small font size and the huge volume of this book, but you know, that's no reason to be discouraged by. After all, you know, having read The Lord of the Rings, Narnia, and all those kinds of books, I know I'm ready to give this, you know, a really serious read through, and looking forward to reading this. Now, speaking of large volumes and small font sizes, The Sundering by Gaff Thorpe. So most of you don't know that I am a huge Warhammer fan. In fact, almost 15 years ago I used to collect these small miniature wargaming figures from the Warhammer series, and it was a very nice hobby, but I was mostly interested in the backstories of all the different factions and the races and the Empire and the High Elves and the Dark Elves and the Dwarves. And I really wanted to read a book which provided some backstory to the elves from the Warhammer world. So I got this book. Again, I have yet to read this, but again, it's quite a large volume. It contains, I believe, a number of short stories and 2 longer works. So yes, it has five parts. So Malekith, The Blooded Hand, The Shadow King, Caledor, and The Dark Path. And as you can see, the font size is quite ridiculously small. But I guess they had to do that in order to contain this in a single volume. again, I've read some very good things about this, and I'm really looking forward to sitting down one day, having read the rest of my TBR pile, and just dipping into this long history of the elves from the Warhammer world. Okay, and next up from the fantasy genre, we have the quite popular Game of Thrones series by George R.R. Martin. Now, admittedly, I only have the first volume from A Song of Ice and Fire, which is a Game of Thrones. I loved this book. I really enjoyed it. I think the character development is fantastic, alongside with the world building and the way Martin writes. But I have yet to read the rest of the books, and admittedly I've been holding back from purchasing the rest of the books before the final 2 volumes are released. So, you know, maybe one day that eventually happens. But in the meantime, I did purchase a couple of other books by George R.R. Martin. One of them being The Ice Dragon, which is this really beautiful short novella, which some people say is not particularly canon, is not part of the A Song of Ice and Fire world, but you know, you could read it that way. I personally did. I found it to be part of the world of Westeros and you know, all the characters we know from the Game of Thrones series. But yeah, it's a really beautiful read, so with some really lovely illustrations inside, and yeah, so be sure to check this out. I also really enjoyed A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Now, this is a series of novellas or short stories from the world of Game of Thrones ultimately, and it takes place roughly a couple of 100 years, I believe, before the start of Game of Thrones, when the Targaryen kings were still ruling most of Westeros. Especially if you love the idea of the medieval world, the Middle Ages, chivalry, tournaments and games and challenges, and some really good storytelling, then this is the book for you. And another book I purchased, as I said, even though I have not yet read the other 4 volumes in the Song of Ice and Fire series, I had to get myself the World of Ice and Fire book. And this is a kind of encyclopedia compiled of all the different races, the histories, the people, the family trees and everything. And it contains this really in-depth history with some beautiful illustrations about the world of Westeros and the lands and all the families and, you know, the different locations. And it's quite a beautiful and very comprehensive book. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to reading the Clash of Kings and the Feast for Crows and the Dance of Dragons eventually. But do let me know what you think, whether I should go ahead and continue reading A Song of Ice and Fire. I'd really love to hear your thoughts about that. Next, now this is huge. I mean, this fantasy series is probably my second most favorite fantasy series after The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit and all that. You know about that stuff. You know about it. But this is basically the Powder Mage Trilogy by Brian McClellan. And this is what's known as flintlock fantasy. So it's almost late 1700s, early 1800s, very Napoleonic French Revolution kind of fantasy. It's a completely new world, fantasy world, so it has no basis in the real world, but you know, certain elements, the way the costumes, the way people speak, the kind of weaponry is very end of 1700s, early 1800s. So in the Powder Mage Trilogy we have the first book, which is Promise of Blood. Then we have the Crimson Campaign and the Autumn Republic. Now, if you love world building, if you love massive battles, if you love great characters or characters which have some very interesting character arcs and detail, it's politics, backstabbing, all that kind of stuff, this is the book for you. Especially, I just love the battle sequences in the Crimson Campaign, which is volume 2 of the Powder Mage Trilogy. I think McClellan, his writing is absolutely spectacular. So imagine my surprise when having read the trilogy, the Powder Mage trilogy, I realized that in the subsequent years, by the time I discovered that this trilogy actually existed, the author managed to write another trilogy. And this time it was the Gods of Blood and Powder trilogy, which pretty much takes place 10 years after the events in the Powder Mage trilogy. And again, Brian McClellan just managed to supersede what he had done before. And it's an equally powerful trilogy in its own right, with its own set of characters, some returning characters as well from the first trilogy. And here we have the first volume, which is Sins of Empire, the second volume, Wrath of Empire, and the final volume, Blood of Empire. And if that wasn't enough, the author very kindly managed to write a number of short stories and novellas and get them published in a series of very short publications. These are actually the hardback versions, but they're also available as an ebook as well, so you can download straight away on your tablet or Kindle. And these are all part of the Powder Mage world, so to speak. They're all part of the fantasy world created by McClellan, and a lot of these actually are about the backstory, and they take place before the Powder Mage trilogy, so you get to meet how the characters actually ended up being who they are in the trilogies themselves through these books. And here we have the Mad Lancers, about a very, very particular character known as Ben Stike, or Mad Ben Stike. We have In the Field Marshal's Shadow, which is a collection of short stories about General Damas. Murder at the Kennan Hotel, Servant of the Crown, Ghosts of the Tristan Basin, and the first novella in the series, so to speak, is Forsworn. Now, I've been trying so much to decide which one of these is my favorite, or even which one of the two trilogies is my favorite, and I can't. It's impossible. Just read them from start to end and make up your own minds. Let me know what you think. If you've read any one of these books or the trilogies or both of them, I would really, really love to hear your thoughts about them. Now, let's be honest, we can't mention fantasy without mentioning a book series which the majority of you out there have actually read or even remotely heard about. Yeah. So basically, this is the complete Harry Potter collection, which contains the 7 books, and they've got the adult cover versions, I believe these. So I'll show you right here. So this is the entire collection. I've only managed to read till volume 4, so The Goblet of Fire. I really, really enjoyed these books so far. I'm a fan of the films, but obviously I wanted to read the original source, so to speak. And I have to say, I really enjoyed the first 4 books so far, and I'm really excited to continue reading the rest. What struck me most was the way Rowling, especially after each book, consecutive book, summarizes what went on in the previous book. So you really get, especially if you don't read the books one after the other, and you allow some time between each read, you can actually, focus and let yourself be immersed once again into the events of what happened in the last book you've just read. So it makes it easier to wander through this magical world. So I really, really enjoyed that part of writing from Rowling. And as part of the Harry Potter series, so to speak, I also have the Hogwarts Classics, which consists of 2 books, the Tales of Beedle the Bard and Quidditch Through the Ages. I just love the covers on both of these books and the colors and everything. Not to mention the very sort of simple illustrations, but quite effective illustrations as well. Even the texture of the pages and everything, and the way it's meant to look as if they're part of the Hogwarts library collection. With character names having taken the book out, and It's a really nice touch, and besides, I think the Tales of Beedle the Bard is quite a landmark book in the series, in the way it presents these several very simple short stories, but very effective, with a very important and meaningful message in each and every one of them. So a really well done job by J.K. Rowling. Actually, when I originally bought the Hogwarts Classics box set, I thought it would include also the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them book, but apparently that was in another edition, another box set collection thing. But yeah, I don't have Fantastic Beasts so far, but again, I really look forward to getting a copy and actually sitting down to read it. And finally, in my fantasy book collection, I have the Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. I've only read the first two, so Eragon and Eldest. I really enjoyed Eragon. It's obvious the influences from Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, they're there, but I think it's a really solid story, and it holds up really well, especially for someone to have started writing this at 15 years. It's quite remarkable. Eldest, I have to say I was a bit disappointed with this book. I know it's probably a very unpopular opinion. I know I felt that, and without spoiling anything to anyone who hasn't actually read these books or this particular book, I felt that the main plot was sidelined, and rather the subplot should actually have been the main plot of the story. There was a lot of jumping from the main plot to the subplot, but I felt very much that the subplot itself was the main focus of the story, and the main plot itself didn't actually move forward the story that much. I don't know, maybe I need to read this again, but yeah, that's my impression. And obviously I have yet to read Brisingar, the third book in the cycle, and finally Inheritance. Yeah, I'm still up for, knowing what happens next. I want to know what happens to all the characters that have been introduced to us in the first two books. But as I said, I wasn't too sure about the structure or the approach for the second book. I mean, maybe that will change with the third one. I don't know. Who knows? I'll have to give it a shot. Let me know what you think. So that's pretty much it from my fantasy collection, besides all the Tolkien books you have seen during the last few months. I'm sure there are a couple of other volumes, maybe fantasy related, but these ones here presented today are the main fantasy books that I own, which are not Tolkien. So let me know what you think about anything you've read or did not read from the books I have shown you. Let me know of any other fantasy books which you would really suggest I would read. Right now I'm particularly interested in the Malazan book series, I believe, by Erickson, and there's also The Wheel of Time I'm considering, not to mention Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn, the Ertzi series. Please do let me know what you guys think I should read next, or any opinions or disagreements about what we've said today. So anyway, in the meantime, thanks a lot for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!